Hello my friends and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 build guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're going to be covering my pick for the best Bard build in Baldur's Gate 3. This guide will be extremely detailed and aimed at beginners and veteran players alike, so we're going to be going over every decision that you need to make in order to have the most powerful Bard available to you in quite a lot of detail, so get ready. I have used an example character as the main character, or a main character as the example character for this build, because I think typically a bard is going to want to be your main character. There's no bard by default amongst the companion classes, and bard makes an excellent main character since you get access to all of the conversation skills. And in fact, in this build, we are going to get access not only to all the conversation skills, but the highest possible bonus in all 4 conversation skills, so we'll be able to pass any dialogue check that we need to. For your character race, you are going to want to pick between, I think there are 3 that stand out above the others. I've gone with a Githyanki here, because this gives you access to astral knowledge, and bards, as a sort of jack of all trades, benefit very strongly from gaining proficiency in a bunch of extra skills. In fact, you even have a class feature called Jack of all Trades. The more skill checks you can pass, the better you can fit in, and bards fit in very well to every possible party configuration, so having more skill access is really strong. The other 2 races that stand out are Wood Elf or Half Wood Elf, which stand out for bards, but also just for every single possible character, because they have 35-foot move speed, and additional mobility compared to the default 30-foot, and additional mobility is incredibly powerful. So Wood Elves are by far the best race by default, I think, although the Githyanki's Misty Step does rival that. And the other race that comes out ahead of the pack is the Halfling. The reason for this is that Halflings have the ability to reroll natural ones, including on concentration checks, and we will be concentrating on a spell just about every single round of every single combat in the game, so Halflings rerolling 1s on concentration means we'll lose concentration significantly less often over the course of the game, and can really benefit you on average in terms of keeping your spells up. That being said, I think that the strongest option is still Githyanki for the extra astral knowledge, and that's what we've gone with. For your character background, I've gone with Guild Artisan for this one, giving us proficiency in insight and persuasion. We of course want persuasion, but the only important thing for your background is that you avoid getting proficiency in deception or performance. The reason for that will become clear later on, but you want to actually avoid the entertainer background, which seems like the natural pick for a bard, but will actually cost us skill proficiencies down the line. So as long as you avoid those 2 skills, whatever background you pick will be fine. The first thing that we have to do when we are building our character is we have to fix these default stats. The Bard default stats are not as far from the optimal spread as many characters are, many classes' default stats are, but there's certainly some optimizations we can make. Firstly, there are 3 odd numbers in your default stats, and those are bad. You usually never want odd numbers when you're building D&D characters, and you certainly don't want 3 odd numbers, because you only get bonuses at even numbers of these attributes to the actual rolls that you're making. So we can definitely fix that by changing these abilities around. We're going to take this pip out of Dexterity and place it in Constitution, leaving Dexterity at 14. Then we're going to take these useless points out of Intelligence, bards never have a use for Intelligence, and place them into Constitution, getting us 16 Constitution and maxing out our available hit points. Almost every character is going to want 16 Constitution. The default point spread for a caster is going to look like 14 Dexterity, 16 Constitution, 16 in their casting stat, whether that be Charisma, Wisdom, or Intelligence, depending on what you are, Charisma for bards, and 12 Wisdom. The reason for this is that Wisdom is the best of the remaining saving throws. In Dungeons & Dragons, each of these abilities has an associated saving throw with it, and 3 of them are good and 3 of them are bad. You get 3 strong saving throws and 3 weak saving throws, or 3 important saving throws and 3 less important saving throws. Every class gives you proficiency in 2 of those saving throws, and it will always be 1 important one and 1 unimportant one. Dexterity, Constitution, and Wisdom are the 3 important ones, and the other 3 are unimportant. bards get proficiency in charisma and in dexterity. So you get one good one in dexterity and one bad one in charisma. So we place our points in wisdom because we don't need intelligence or strength for the saving throws. That being said, for a main character, you would normally want to place... You might want to consider removing some points just to have a couple extra points in strength, because additional carry weight and jump distance can be pretty useful. And for this character, we're actually going to do something a little different than the default. We're going to go with 17 charisma. The reason for that will become clear later on down the line, but for now, just bear with me and accept that we need this odd number. There is also a way to boost one of your stats by 1 during Act 1 in Baldur's Gate 3 specifically. I won't spoil how it works exactly, but if you intend to use that, then you can go with 16 charisma and 12 wisdom or 10 strength, but if you, by default, you're going to want to get 17 charisma. You can also always respec these numbers later in the game, so don't feel locked in. For our skill selection, we want, as I said, you want to have access to all the dialogue skills, but not deception and performance. Although, if you want to use a respec later on, you can take these and then respec out of them later on down the line. But for now, I think you're going to be fine just having persuasion and intimidation as your dialogue skills. And then for your last two skills, I would recommend getting sleight of hand and stealth. These are incredibly useful. Every party will want access to them. You have decent dexterity, so you can roll these very well. These are going to be the bread and butter of a lot of bards as well, and give you a ton of additional options for mobility, as well as to open chests and deal with traps. If you already have sleight of hand on another character, another good option is acrobatics, or you could take one of the other skills. If you're a Githyanki, try to leave one category empty, so notice I've taken no intelligence skills, because then you can set your astral knowledge to that skill and gain the maximum benefit from it. Starting instrument doesn't matter, but let's also pick our spells. At level 1, we're going to want to take... there's a few spells that are really important to have. You are going to want to have Sleep at level 1. We will remove this later in the game. We'll replace this with a spell that scales better. But at level 1, this is the single best action in the game. It, with no saving throw, just takes an enemy out as long as their hit points are 24 or lower. It can even hit 2 enemies if they have a combined total of 24 or lower hit points. And it takes them out for 2 whole turns. With no save, knocking an enemy out for 2 turns is ludicrously powerful. Our other options are less important, but I personally quite like having Healing Word. Bards typically don't have great uses for their bonus actions, and Healing Word is one of the best bonus actions in the game, so having access to that is very helpful. I like having Thunder Wave, and then finally for the last one, I personally like having Speak with Animals, because it gives you a lot of opportunity to engage with the game very well. For our cantrip selection, you're going to want Vicious Mockery. This is less of an important pick to have your damaging cantrip on bards than on other casters, because Vicious Mockery is the weakest of the damaging cantrips, but is still pretty nice to have, and I also quite like having Friends. If you feel like you'd rather just use Archery for your default attacks, you can skip Vicious Mockery and take one of the really strong utility spells, being Minor Illusion or Mage Hand. But for now, I'm going to assume that you've picked this. We also get Mage Hand from being a Githyanki once per day. This is our level 1 selection, and let's hop to level 2. So at level 2, we actually have a decision to make. We are going to want to get access to shield proficiency, because we don't have that, and ideally heavy armor proficiency. We also only need 11 levels of Bard to reach 6 level Bard spells, so we're pretty highly incentivized to put 1 level into a different class. We could do that right now. It will delay access to reaching higher level Bard spells and class features, but then we would get access to heavy armor and shield proficiencies right away, as well as the other benefits of that other class. In my opinion, it's correct to just do this at level 2, although you could also wait until level 4 to get your first feat, or wait until level 5 to get 3rd level spells, but we're just going to go right in and, at level 2, take a single level in Cleric. The reason for this is that if you take Life Domain War Domain, Tempest Domain, or Nature Domain, you get access to heavy armor and shield proficiencies. This is going to increase your AC significantly throughout the game. Shields are excellent for any character, any caster class, which a bard is. Just 2 free AC, as well as the powerful magical effects associated with many shields. And Cleric also gives you a ton of options for engaging in conversation skills as well. You get access to the Thaumaturgy cantrip, which gives you advantage on intimidation and performance checks. This doesn't have the downside of people getting mad at you like Friends does, although I personally have never seen an NPC get mad at me for casting Friends on them, so that may not actually have been implemented in the game. Let me know if you've seen that happen. And then you also get access to Guidance, the single best cantrip in the game, that gives you plus 1d4 to skill checks. You can use this on yourself anytime you are making any skill check, and it's very powerful, or use it on allies. And for our third spell, I like to take Resistance. It comes up sometimes in dialogue, and also just gives you a lot of extra options for saving throws, although any of the other 3 are very good. Light or Blade Ward. Any of these 3 are very good. Resistance, Light, or Blade Ward all have lots of utility. For our subclass, I would suggest taking Life Domain. You will then get access to Bless as a domain spell, and concentrating on Bless is going to be one of the best things that you do as a character for the first few levels of the game. You're going to concentrate on Bless, and then support with ranged attacks, whether through Vicious Mockery or Archery. Is one of the most powerful contributions you can make. You also get the Disciple of Life subclass feature, and we took Healing Word as one of our Bard spells. Healing Word will give you Healing Word plus 3, meaning it more than doubles the effectiveness of Healing Word. Disciple of Life is extremely valuable on low-level healing spells. It scales obviously very well, right? Like a level 1 spell gets 2 plus the spell's level, so you gain plus 3 points. A level 2 healing spell only gains 4 points, so you're only gaining 33% there, whereas the level 1 spell, this almost doubles the effectiveness of healing at level 1. You don't usually want to spend actions on healing in combat, but having your bonus action heal for up to 8 is incredibly strong at this point in the game. Highly recommend going Life Domain Cleric. You also get access to shields and heavy armor. For our deity, you probably want to pick Selûne because there's a lot of unique dialogue options available if you do that, and we only get 1 prepared spell because we only have 10 wisdom. For that prepared spell, I think you should probably go with Sanctuary. This is another bonus action. It's not concentration, and it allows you to save an ally. There's tons of creative uses for Sanctuary, and I recommend you explore using these. One of the best is just to block a doorway with an invincible ally, and then shoot any enemies who are stuck on the other side of that doorway with arrows and stuff, but there's all sorts of cool things that you can do. So we're going to take a level of Cleric to get access to heavy armor, shields, and a bunch of very powerful utility effects. Then we go back to Bard. There aren't a lot of decisions to make, but at this point you are likely to want to replace Sleep that we took at level 1 because it will have fallen off of its scaling, and I recommend that you replace it with Thunderwave. We already took Thunderwave with Longstrider. You can cast this without spending a spell slot because it's a ritual spell and it just gives your whole team plus 10 feet of movement speed. And then for the actual spell that we're taking at this level, I think it's less important, but I like having access to Fairy Fire. Disguise Self gives you a ton of role-playing options, so personally I would take Disguise Self here. We're already quite good in combat just between our healing and our Bless and arrow attacks or Vicious Mockeries, so just having access to more role-playing options because you're a bard, that's what you want to do, I think is the best option here. You also get the Song of Rest ability, which is very powerful. Just gets you a 3rd short rest in a day, which is very nice. Just lots of bonus out-of-combat healing for your party. Level 3 Bard, we get to make the most important decision that we will make here, which subclass we're going to go. College of Valor gives you medium armor proficiency, and not much else. We got medium armor from being a Githyanki, or heavy armor from being a Cleric, so we can pretty safely ignore College of Valor. College of Swords is more melee-oriented, and is good for archer bards, but less good for spellcasting bards, and I think those are the most powerful, so we're going to go with College of Lore. One reason for this is that bards, up until now, have not had great uses for their reaction, and every character in combat gets access to basically 5 resources. You get your action, your bonus action, your concentration, your movement, and your reaction. And we want to be maximizing all 5 of those resources at any point in time. Bards are very good at having an important spell to concentrate on. You're very good at having actions. You've got good bonus actions with Healing Word and Bardic Inspiration, but now we get a good reaction because we can now spend an Inspiration die to reduce an enemy attack. This doesn't, the tooltip on this is bad, but basically this lets you, in response to an enemy attacking, roll a reverse Bardic Inspiration die to cause them to miss. Or, in response to an enemy making a saving throw, which is even better, cause them to fail a save. Cutting Words is one of the best features in the game, and also uses a resource you weren't otherwise using, so it's extremely strong. At level 2, we also get access to better spells. One that you will always want is Cloud of Daggers. This is no save damage, and it's very consistent throughout combat. And we will also likely want to replace one of our low-level spells, whichever one you find you're not using. Like, let's say you have Long Strider from another source, or you aren't using Thunder Wave. You probably want to replace it with another level 2 spell. And the level 2 spell that I would suggest is Heat Metal. This is 2 concentration spells, but Heat Metal is very nice because it gives you another use for your bonus action in combat, which you don't always want to inspire or heal, especially now that we have better uses for our inspiration dice with Cutting Words. But Heat Metal gives the enemy disadvantage on all their attacks, or makes them drop their weapon, and then lets you continue to damage them every turn that you're concentrating on it as a bonus action. Really improves your action economy and is very powerful overall. We also, at level 3 Bard, get access to Expertise in 2 skills. We're going to take Intimidation and Persuasion, so now we have massive bonuses to these skills, and 3 more proficient skills. If you're a Githyanki, you're going to, again, want to avoid taking them all in, avoid one category, but by this point you should know what skills your party is missing and take those. I would probably recommend taking Acrobatics just to make yourself a little harder to push. Every party needs access to Perception, and then the last one I might just stick wherever. Again, you'll know what you need to be rolling at this point in the game, depending on who you're bringing. Level 4 Bard, we get our first feat, and the feat that we're going to take is why we took an odd number in Charisma, and also why we avoided taking Deception and Performance at level 1, because the feat that we take is Actor. This still gets us to 18 Charisma, and gets us Expertise in Deception and Performance, and you don't need Proficiency in those skills to get Expertise. So basically we skipped Proficiency and now have Expertise in every dialogue skill for the highest possible dialogue checks in the game. We also get advantage on every dialogue skill between Thaumaturgy and Friends, so huge bonus and excellent character for passing every dialogue check. Will be the best party face that you can possibly have. For our spell selection, it's less important. I like to have something that's not concentration as a combat option, so you could take maybe Shatter here, although Silence is always powerful, Invisibility is good. One that I would avoid is Hold Person, because in Baldur's Gate 3, it's actually implemented different than Tabletop. The enemy gets to make a save when you cast it, and then at the beginning of their turn, before it costs them a single turn, so they have to fail 2 saves in a row. That's pretty unlikely on Tactician, so Hold Person usually ends up being a waste of an action in this game. I hope they fix that, because that's not how it's supposed to work. It's not how it works in Tabletop Dungeons & Dragons, but for now, I recommend not using Hold Person. For extra cantrip, you just want to take a utility one. Minor Illusion is very strong, so I would take that, or Mage Hand if you find you want more than one per day. There's also one other tip that I should quickly give you before we continue to level up, because we now have access to Cutting Words, and that is we need to hit a secret button. Go to your character sheet, go to your spell book, go to your Reactions tab, and make sure that Cutting Words is set to Ask when used. By default, this is going to use itself anytime an enemy attacks, and there's a chance of it causing them to miss. But you roll a d6 to reduce the enemy's attack. So let's say they roll a 15 against your AC 10. You only have a 1 in 6 chance of making them miss. You want to be able to decide when this is used, not let the game decide. You should also set opportunity attacks to this to avoid it wasting your reaction on just a melee attack, since your melee attacks won't be good. In fact, you should always have all of your reactions set to ask on use. But that's an especially important tip for this character because we'll have so many reactions you don't want to waste. Level 5 Bard gets you access to level 3 spells, and there's a couple that are extremely strong here. This is one of the best reasons to just be a Bard, is you get access to both of these spells. And those are Hypnotic Pattern, which is a massive AoE. It's a 60-foot range, but more importantly, it's a 30-foot radius, so a 60-foot diameter. And it will, for a single failed save, cost an enemy 2 turns. So this can basically take the entire encounter out of the battle for 2 turns, let you focus them down one at a time, gives you a ton of additional CC and utility. Probably one of the best spells in the game, bar none. Definitely recommend Hypnotic Pattern, and then you're going to want to replace one of the ones that you're not using. Let's say you found Shatter less useful, you're going to want to replace that for Plant Growth. This is non-concentration, and it quarters enemy movement speed in a 20-foot radius. This can basically, for no save, take certain enemies out of the game entirely while they slowly waddle towards you. Quartered movement speed reduces their movement speed from 30 feet to 7.5 feet, stopping enemies completely in their tracks. Level 6, we get one of the other excellent features of the Lore Bard. We get access to these magical secrets. This lets us access spells from any other class list, and oh boy are there some good ones here. There's one that you are always going to want to take, and that is Counterspell. This is actually the single best spell in the game, bar none. It's a reaction that stops an opponent's spellcaster from doing something. You will definitely want to make sure this is set to ask on use, like I showed you earlier, but this is going to be the #1 thing that your character is good for in like half of the fights that you're in. Counterspell is the best possible option. The second one is a little harder because there are so many great options, and I highly recommend you explore this list, but a few that stand out are Fireball, if you just want a nice damage option. Eldritch Blast, which actually, even without the Warlock's Invocation to increase its damage, is still one of the best consistent damage sources in the game. So if you are finding you're spending a lot of turns just shooting arrows, Eldritch Blast can be very good. You also get access to spells that aren't otherwise on any character's spell list other than a single character, such as Hunger of Hadar, a Warlock spell. This is an enormous cloud that blinds enemies with no save and does tons of damage to them. An extremely powerful concentration spell, although you will also have a lot of concentration options, and it is also cool that other than Warlocks, you're the only character that can access this spell. You also have good old Standby Haste, one of the best buffs in the game, and just excellent for any character to have, and the default pick is probably Haste, but like I said, I recommend you really go through this and take your time to pick what you think will help, given where the types of fights you've been doing in the game so far. By level 7, you should have a good sense of the role your character fits in the game and what you want out of them. But I'm going to sort of assume that you took Counterspell and Haste or Counterspell and Hunger of Hadar. I think those are great default options, though also worth mentioning are Fireball, Misty Step, Spirit Guardians, Darkness, Eldritch Blast, Animate Dead. There's so many cool options for magical secrets. We also get another Bard spell, and there's a few that are pretty good here. You could go back for something like Thunderwave that we picked up, that we got rid of earlier. At this point, you've gotten the 2 best level 3 spells, but Stinking Cloud is also very good. It's a 20-foot radius cloud, and if enemies are in it, it stuns them for a turn. You're likely to get at least 1 turn of inaction from an enemy, out of Stinking Cloud, although they will usually be able to leave the radius. Though, since you have non-concentration plant growth, you can place plant growth down to slow them, and then put Stinking Cloud on top of that, causing enemies to always be taking the Stinking Cloud effect. Also works well with Hunger of Hadar. So there's a lot of options. We'll say you took Stinking Cloud here just for the sake of argument. Bard level 7 gets us access to 4th level spells, and this is where Bard does start to fall off a bit in terms of spell selection. The higher level Bard spells are less powerful than the lower level Bard spells. We've already gotten the best ones in terms of Hypnotic Pattern and Plant Growth, as well as some of the lower level ones. So our 4th level slots will often be things like Upcasted Cloud of Daggers. If you wanted to dip into a 3rd class, this is a good point to make that jump, but you do miss out on some of the great class features of higher level bards, so we're going to continue down the path of Bard. A couple options for 4th level spells that are really good are Polymorph. It's a single save to take an enemy out of the fight for 5 turns. It's a wisdom save, so against certain enemies you can be pretty sure they'll have bad wisdom saves and fail that regularly. Confusion should be good. It's a group disabled, similar to Hypnotic Pattern. But I have found that in Baldur's Gate, enemies will often just act normally, even when they have the confusion effect on them. The AI seems to be sort of bugged with how it handles confusion. So until they fix that, if they ever manage to, I recommend avoiding confusion, because I think it just often doesn't function. I don't think I've ever seen them attack an ally because of confusion, and they will just still target your characters as very frequently, so I have not found this one to work as implemented in the game. If they fix it so it works as it's supposed to, then it's a very strong option. But we'll take Polymorph or Greater Invisibility here. At this point, you should know which spells you aren't using and replace them with something you think you might use, but you'll probably be using this whole list at this point, because you'll have optimized it pretty well. Bard level 8 gets us our 2nd feat, and we're just going to max out our charisma. This maxes out our dialogue skills, as well as giving us the highest possible save DC. And take another spell that we think is going to be useful. Freedom of movement can be viable. Breaking an ally out of a stun is good, although there are a lot of powerful enemies in this game that stun, so it can be useful to have access to this. At this point, though, I might just take one of the lower level utility or combat options, like Invisibility or Shatter. Fairy Fire is also good to reveal invisible enemies. There's a few different options here that can be very powerful. Bard level 9, similarly, the 5th level Bard spells are somewhat disappointing because of the Hold Monster has the same problem that Hold Person has, with needing the enemies to fail 2 saving throws. Again, if this worked as it was intended to, it would be very powerful, but unfortunately it does not currently. Dominate Person is good in certain fights and very, very powerful, and Mass Cure Wounds is a pretty weak use of an action, so I would avoid that. My pick is probably going to be Greater Restoration. If you didn't take Freedom of Movement, you can just, as an emergency button, you will mostly be using your 5th level slots on upcasted lower level spells, but this is very useful, or the magical secrets that we'll get next level, but this is very useful in certain emergencies. But things are looking up again when we get access to our 2nd set of magical secrets. All of the lower level spells that I mentioned are of course still great, but we also get access to some higher level spells, including some pretty cool ones like Banishing Smite. This requires you to hit with a ranged attack, so it's less powerful than it would be otherwise, since our to-hit rolls are not going to be as strong, but it's still 5d10 force damage is great damage, and the potential to banish an enemy, as long as they have low health, is very powerful. Just take them out of the fight for 2 turns. So that's one I would consider. Conjure Elemental is great. It's a day-long summon, and like I said, you don't have a ton of uses for your 5th level slots. You can also just get more solid damage with Cone of Cold. This is just a decent damaging effect. I also quite like Wall of Stone. There's a lot of cool things you can do with this, lots of utility on this spell, and of course there's lower level spells as well. Ice Storm is good, ranged AoE damage. Wall of Fire solves a lot of encounters just all by itself. There are many encounters that just instantly are won by having access to Wall of Fire, although most of those are early enough in the game that by the time you hit level 11 it won't be as powerful. And of course there's still the unique spells from other classes that you could have access to. Mass Healing Word is very strong, Warden of, especially with your Life Cleric boost. Warden of Vitality is pretty cool. You are pretty tanky at this point because we've got heavy armor and everything, so you can put up Spirit Guardians and just wade into combat. At this point you'll kind of know what you need, so let's assume you've taken Conjure Elemental and Wall of Stone, just for the sake of it, but I recommend that you play around with these spells. This is the coolest thing about being a lore bard, is getting access to all of these different spells, so try out different things. For our cantrip selection, by this point again you should know what you need, so we'll just take Light for example. And we also get Expertise in 2 more skills, which is incredible. We already have expertise in all of the dialogue skills, so I would just take expertise in sleight of hand and stealth. Although athletics expertise is kind of fun because you can now have quite good athletics even with negative strength and push enemies around. Insight will, if you really want to be the ultimate dialogue guy, you can put the expertise in Insight. Again, at this point you should know what skills you need for your party. Finally, at Bard level 11, we get access to 6th level spells, of which we only have 2 options. Otto's Irresistible Dance, which is a single save for no saving throw disable for up to 10 turns. Really, really powerful, although a lot of the bosses in this game have legendary resistance against crowd control, so it's less powerful against them. But still very good against any enemy with a low wisdom save. Or Eyebite, which lets you have an action. I personally just think Eyebite is really cool, so I like to take that. And let me just show you how it works, because it's a little bit weird. But if we cast Eyebite here, you can target an enemy and make them asleep, which is 10 turns of perfect CC, so really very powerful. This is basically an Otto's Irresistible Dance, as long as they're not taking damage. Fear, which makes them run away, and they can't take actions otherwise, so also very powerful. Or Disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks, which is the less powerful of these. Sickened is, I would say, weaker than the other 2, although I think this one might get around the legendary resistance to crowd control that bosses have. I haven't tested that, so let me know if you know the answer to that. And then if it does, then that's an especially powerful spell. But then once you cast that spell, you can continue to recast it every turn for the next 10 turns. So you get just 10 turns of knocking someone out every single turn, or at least making them save or fall asleep. Very powerful. Putting it all together, we have a character that has dialogue checks in the 13s because of having double proficiency and +5 charisma, as well as excellent bonuses in every other skill check. You have full Bard spellcasting, heavy armor and shield proficiency for great AC and great tanking ability alongside 16 constitution, and you have access to some of the best spells in the game through magical secrets. For gear, I don't think there's anything that you particularly need in specific for a bard. There's a couple of options that stand out a little bit, like this +2 charisma hat that you get later on will of course buff all your save DCs and everything, and you just want the best heavy armor, best shield that you can find. You will use a crossbow in the early game, so make sure you get a decent heavy crossbow early on, and that will help out a lot. And for your melee weapon, you will almost never be making melee attacks, so just take whatever you happen to want there. Make sure that it's one-handed so you can have a shield. Keep an eye out for anything that increases your charisma, your dialogue checks, and your spell save DCs. Those are going to be the most important things that you can have. Also, you have a lot of bonus action healing, so the items that give you buffs when you heal an ally are very powerful, and items that have rider effects on healing allies. Any other rider effect on healing allies is great. And items that prevent you from losing concentration. So basically just anything that looks like it should be good for a spellcaster, plus save DC is the best. Put that on and then get the best heavy armor and shield you can find, and you'll be golden in terms of items. Alright, my friends, I hope that you have enjoyed this video. This is a very detailed look at the best bard in Baldur's Gate 3. And as always, if you have, feel free to leave a comment, like the video. Both of those things help a ton with the algorithm. So I would appreciate if you would take the time to do that, and you can of course subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 builds and other strategy game content. Cheers, my friends, and I'll catch you next time.